Hey y'all, it's your girl S Neil here, and we're back with Tempo Is, and we're just gonna go ahead and get started. I just hope that we only have maybe this video and one more, and if not, hopefully just this one. Okay, this is where we left off. Sleeping soundly, I see. Who are we talking? This hasn't happened in a while, has it? Why are you sleeping down here? I wonder if you think it's safer. That'd be foolish of you. I'm glad you're alive and well, Herman. I really am. I hope you get the most of this sleep. Do you? That's an interesting clock. I slept through most of the day. I actually slept. It's still going. You know, I thought Felice was gonna check on us, but nope. We are pretty recluse. What's going on? Why isn't it coming out? Maybe it's gonna come out of the ceiling. What is this? It's the ring. I'll check the well. Does he live on a farmhouse or something? Just what I needed. Back door it is then. Oh, he's snowed in. You know, he does live on the mountain. And that earthquake did bring an avalanche in a way. It's not that dark out, is it? It's not that dark out, is it? It can't be. Okay. Are we losing our marbles or what? I see. Herman, what are you talking about? I guess it's time to get that shit fixed. The day before. I mean, the earthquake is still happening? It's been happening for 2 days, they're saying. Hey, you. Hey, what happened? I got Francie to call. What did he say? Should I get back early? Don't worry, we'll talk tonight. He's fine. I say with hesitation. I think he's better now that he's told me. What difference would have made telling you in the afternoon? I can't make any sense of this. I mean, are you sure? Yes. Even though it was dark in there, he still gave me a detailed description of it. He couldn't tell if it was male or female, but it looked young. Short, dark hair, a pointy, weird nose. Its skin was completely white, like a ghost, he said, his words. Was there a bad smell? He mentioned the whole room smelled weird, but I don't know what kind of weird. But how? Was it like all cooped up in there? I don't understand. It was apparently sitting in there. There was enough room for it. What was it wearing? Black? Something like a black shirt. Nobody's gonna mention the wings? There were old clothes hanging on both of its sides, but it's not clear whether they were supposed to be hiding it. Huh. You know what he saw, don't you? No, I really don't. It was a doll. That's creepy. A doll. Why? No, you don't understand. It was big. Don't ask why of all the questions you could ask. Felice is weird too. Oh, now I see what you mean. Those dolls are very clearly something else. Francie couldn't even tell if it was a boy or a girl. You know, I might be judging too quick here. It might have also been a puppet, maybe an artsy, really realistic one. Could also have been his mother's, considering it was in that room. It was my mother's bedroom, but I left most of her personal belongings I didn't know what to do with. How are you so calm about this? How can you be so sure? Calm about a friend hiding a doll in a wardrobe? How can you be so sure when your son cried about what might have been a dead person? Again, he's a child. I forgot the son's name was Francie. He showed up for like 5 seconds every now and again. He's never seen a real dead person, nor a realistic doll, I don't think. You know what? I did ask in the last one when they were all sitting at the dining table, the little boy did get up and he just left. And I assumed that he just went to the bathroom or he was just a forgotten sprite. But I guess he had started wandering around the house. What a nosy little shit. And like, I guess he went into the mom's room and saw Tenpo, is what I'm thinking. But anyway, this must be the day after they visited or something. I'm still not sure. But it's told non-linearly, so I'm not sure if it's to its advantage yet, just yet. But we'll see. Still, I find it unbelievable. What is more unbelievable? Do you seriously suspect Herman to have hidden a corpse in a wardrobe? Right then as we were coming to visit? I'm just saying that Francie didn't lie. He's a lot more discerning than you think he is, even considering his age. I also know that Herman wasn't himself. He wasn't fine. You said so too. A change like that must have been caused by something that can't be remedied. That's something I thought about that very day we went to his house. Now I have an explanation for it. You aren't thinking clearly. You really need to calm down and take the time to think about this more logically. I took my time. I decided that whatever it was that Francie saw wasn't there for anyone to see. I don't know what degree of wrong it was, but I can't just take your explanation for a certainty. Alright, what do you intend to do? For now, there is only one thing I'm sure about. That is never speaking of this. Never mention it, Felice, ever. You mean to Herman? To anyone. That's some dark secret, alright. He would never recover. That's the sort of stuff people won't forget. Why aren't you taking this seriously? You have no idea what Francie saw. Well, neither does she. You have no way of knowing how Herman might react. Has he reacted bad in the past? I know what he saw. The only one who doubts here is you. I have no doubts. I don't care about your lack of doubts. I have no intention of putting my son's safety at stake because you lack doubts. What you're saying is Herman isn't our friend anymore because he hides a doll in a wardrobe. If that's the only way to be safe, then yes. Just don't take your son over there. I see. Felice, what the heck? Nice fucking friend you are. That was a pretty tame fight. I didn't know they were fighting until they were like explaining stuff to me. But okay. Oh, so she asked you to keep her stuff around? No, we haven't talked about it. We haven't talked at all, to be honest. I really don't know what to hope for. There's that wardrobe. I guess this is where the horror comes in. How did the sun come in here and it wasn't flooded like this? Tempo remembered everything he had forgotten. This is what happened, starting from around 2 years before. Ugh. I guess we're going all the way back in the past. Tempo was in the company of a woman. Her name was Marta. Did she ever tell us her name? No. She looked somewhat tired and saddened. Tempo was concerned and gloomy. When I asked what you wanted me to do, you didn't answer. Why? I kept talking. It was like you weren't listening. You did very good, Tempo. You have to decide by yourself sometimes, even for me. I trust you'll take good decisions. Then they hugged. Tempo and Marta were very close. You don't need to be my shadow. I'm fine now. If you stay inside for too long, you become all jumpy and quirky. Go now, don't worry. Be careful. Fly. They released each other's hands and Tempo left. That was November, and now this is December. Now the house looks like Herman's house. Maybe it's always looked like Herman's house. Marta had always told him not to be around while other humans were over at her house. She would have called him if necessary. Tempo had been away for a few days. During those days, there had been a constant coming and going of cars. People, it was definitely unusual. Humans went there sometimes. It wasn't a frequent occurrence, but it happened. Ka. Ka. Nothing moved in Marta's house. Every room was dark, no one at the windows. Tempo kept announcing his presence until he got suspicious about the complete lack of response. He decided to go inside and check for himself. Something was different about the house. Many objects scattered around and many missing. Had a robbery taken place? That seemed unlikely. The few things that could be considered valuable in that house were still around and on display. Did something happen to Marta? He couldn't find her anywhere in the house. Marta normally went to the nearest village only in the morning or midday. She wouldn't have left the house in that state. Still, she was a bit unpredictable, and it wouldn't have been the first time she broke a habit, so Tempo wasn't too worried. He let himself fall in her bed face down. He turned around again and again, delighting in the soft surface until he fell asleep. In his sleep, he heard strange noises, a car. By the time he woke up, they weren't car noises anymore, but heavy footsteps inside the house. In a flash of panic, Tempo jumped down the bed and tried to get the window open. Those definitely weren't Marta's footsteps. With his head out of the window, he peeked around just for a moment to make sure no humans were outside. Then he flew towards the nearest tree. He decided to stay in hiding to observe. After a while, he saw somebody in Marta's room closing the window and the curtains. He couldn't see this person's face. Looks like Herman. There was somebody in Marta's bedroom and Marta wasn't there. So is the mom in the hospital or is she not alive? I don't know. December Part 2. Tempo observed from afar. Cars and other vehicles came and went almost every day. Some sort of maintenance works were taking place inside and outside the house. Marta was never there. Was she brought away against her will? Why didn't she call him? She swore she would have if in danger. He rarely ventured far from the forest. He definitely hadn't during those days. He would have heard any sort of human commotion. Maybe she decided to leave. She wouldn't have done that without a good reason, nor without telling him first. Tempo was starting to think the only way to find out what was going on was to confront one of the humans directly and ask. Days went by as he waited for Marta to come back. Sometimes when no strangers seemed to be around, he kept trying to call her, screeching sadly. Whenever he'd see humans, his thoughts became darker and darker as the days went by. I'll kill you. If you hurt her, I'll kill you. He found himself starting to plot revenge. Most of the humans seemed to just go along with their manual jobs and not even talk about Marta. Except for one time, when Tempo managed to catch a conversation that seemed to refer to her. Why would he want to live here? It's too isolated. Is it even legal? You saw the sign? It's restricted access, just like the rest of the mountain. Boss said he's a friend and he owes him. Yeah, but one has to wonder. Can you believe an old woman lived here? Seriously? How does she even manage in the middle of nowhere like this? Sounds like they've never even met Marta. They're working for somebody else? Who is it? There has to be someone responsible for all that is happening. The one person that seems to always be here. The one person that stands out. The one person that often remains here alone. There was this one human. He stayed for long and even slept there sometimes. Wasn't that the same person that was in her bedroom that time? Sadness and anger grew in Tenpo's heart as he kept seeing the same man in the house and in the forest. For about a month, Tenpo couldn't find the right time to observe him up close. January. When they met for the first time, they were both in the forest. Tenpo had seen him many times by then. He didn't seem like a disruptive human, and he wasn't too nosy. However, he was extremely suspicious, because since he was there, Marta wasn't. He was the likely culprit of her disappearance, therefore the likely target of his questioning and possibly his revenge. That day, he seemed to just be taking a walk in the forest. Tenpo heard him get closer and tried to be as quiet as possible. He moved towards the path the man was walking. Sooner or later, he'll have to see me. Something on the ground grabbed the man's attention, so he stopped to check. Let's see how he reacts. Tenpo gathered courage and jumped on the tree right in front of the man. He didn't have a definitive plan on what to do next. He decided to follow his impulse, and he was very angry. I might just be the last thing he sees. The man seemed too focused on his search at first. No sound could gather his attention. In a moment of dead silence, he might have felt their presence. It must have been Tenpo's eyes that became too heavy on him. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes crept up the tree without rush until they met Tenpo's. He looks kind of cute. They stared at each other for a couple of seconds, both perfectly still. The man spent most of that time trying to make sense of the sight. What am I looking at? So, are we supposed to... is Herman supposed to be Manhole? It's like the same first encounter type of thing. I must be mistaking a shadow or a cluster of leaves for something completely different, is what he thought. A very inventive failure of perception. Something. Someone. That's absurd. Then Tenpo had an almost imperceptible change in expression. Only at that point the man realized he was looking at something actually real. Tenpo flew away with a sudden jump at the slightest movement of the man, who lost sight of him almost immediately. Shocked, he just stared at empty space for a while. That moment changed their worlds entirely. Even Tenpo's, who had realized he hadn't just met a human like any other. He just met Marta's son. He wasn't expecting to meet him so suddenly. For the time being, he decided to abandon his plans for revenge. Yet he had no reason to free him from guilt. Marta was still missing. February. Real confrontation between the two came sometime later in Marta's house. The front door was open. The human had been carrying all kinds of things inside for a while. It looked nothing like before. The whole entrance hall was missing, and many boxes were scattered around inside. The human had just come out of a room and suddenly saw Tenpo just past the doorstep, curiously looking around. Man froze, shocked. He backed away without even remembering about the door he just closed behind himself. That caused a loud noise that suddenly pulled Tenpo from his looking around and got him to screech straight at Marta's son. The man raised his hands defensively. No, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. As he asked himself, does it even understand what I'm saying? Tempo's attitude turned calmer. Just as you'd expect from anyone who understands that gesture and sentence. However, Tempo decided not to waste any time and immediately came clear. Marta, where is she? At first, the man didn't know what to answer. The unexpected sound of Tempo's voice seemed to freeze him. Having no patience at all at the moment, Tempo started looking around and thrashing whatever looked unfamiliar to him. Please stop. The man spoke with worry, but gently. Marta isn't here. She's not in this house. Tempo listened on, looking angered. She's in town. She was sick, so she went there to get cured. The man then witnessed an incredible change of expression on Tempo's face. Hurt by those words, the pain he felt transpired his honest eyes. The man meant to say something else, but was left speechless by the other's reaction. Tempo suddenly turned around and hastily stepped outside. The man just stood there, hearing sad, raspy screams slowly getting further and further. The weather slightly warmed up during the last days of February, and a new meeting warmed the atmosphere between the two as well. The human had been picking up fruit while exploring a lower area of the mountain. Instead of returning home, he decided to explore further and keep going, entering a denser forest area. Tempo was surprised to see him there, far from the house. The man soon spotted him and walked to the tree he was standing on. Before saying anything, he raised his basket in the air. Apples for you? Have some. Or take the whole basket if you like. Tempo stared, surprised, then inspected the offer. I'm guessing you're not used to this? He grabbed a small orange from a pocket inside his jacket and placed it in the basket. Look, this is ripe. Herman slowly lowered the basket, dumbfounded. You should leave. This is no place for humans to be. That was an unexpected change in tone. Those cold words, carried by a displeased and tired look, felt unexpectedly harsh. The man's first instinct was not to defend his position and leave, but as he was about to turn around, the other continued. Boars can be aggressive around here. Avoid these denser areas. Then a small, odd smile grew on Tempo's face, and his tone changed a bit. And after all, I'm sure humans have rules that prevent them from coming here, right? What makes you think it's safe to just go around so casually? Pay more attention to your own rules. With that, Tempo left, and Herman was left there confused, wondering, and somehow really happy. That's how lonely we are. We talked to this weird bird creature. Part 3. Just some days later, Tempo caught an inviting smell coming from the house. He saw smoke coming from the kitchen. What really grabbed his attention, however, were a couple of foxes standing not too far away from where he was. They had definitely noticed the smell as well. After contemplating for a moment to just let the situation unfold, he decided to fly on the house's roof. The foxes wouldn't have dared to get close if he was there. The man heard him land and went outside to check. As he saw Tempo, his face lit up. Okay, well, what happened? Because at first I thought maybe Herman didn't know that Tempo existed, but he does. Foxes gathered out here. Hey, hello, thanks for the warning. I'd better close the windows then. Since you're here, why don't you come inside and have lunch with me? Tempo really did consider declining the offer, but the smell was so nice. That's pork. I also have some veal you should try. Help yourself, there's plenty. Tempo tried to understand what was going on. A human trying his best to display good intentions is what it seemed. This time it was clearly no casual gesture. He was invited inside to take a seat, and there was apparently more than enough for 2 people to eat. The man placed some plates on the table and went back to roast some more meat. I don't think I've introduced myself yet. My name is Herman. Tempo. Herman hesitated for a moment and turned to face the other. Tempo? Tenpo. Tenpo. For some reason, that caused the man to crack a big, surprised smile. He hastily turned back, but his feelings could be heard in his jittery tone. Tempo, I'm really happy to meet you. Do you live here on the mountain? Yes. Tempo felt somewhat confused. The man looked an odd mixture of nervous and sleepy, and he was finding it more and more difficult to hold any kind of animosity towards him. Herman is a weird name, compared to the ones I usually hear, I mean. It's not a name from around here. I was named after my grandpa, my father's side, born in another nation. He moved to this country to marry my grandmother. Tempo is an unknown name to me, too. Is it common here on the mountain? Herman had so many questions clouding his mind, but he really didn't want to come off as invasive. No, only mine. The man turned around and saw Tempo was already almost done with his meal. Do you like it? You should try this one too. Wait. Would you prefer it raw by chance? I don't know how I didn't think of that. I like it cooked as well. They kept eating in silence for a bit. Tempo rarely ever interacted with people besides Marta, and felt the situation was somewhat surreal, almost as surreal as it was for Herman. You know what? I bet this is also Martha's child, too. I'm not really sure. When the man gathered the courage to, he finally spoke up. I couldn't help but think about what you said the other day. What did I say? About the area being restricted access. It was not until you talked about it that an obvious question came to mind. Since authorities have always been vague on the matter, do you know why it is? Are you the reason? Herman couldn't eye Tempo directly after saying that. That's a big question. If I answer it, it'll grant me big question rights. Uh-huh. Of course. I'm probably one reason. There was a long silence during which Herman was clearly trying to come up with only one follow-up question, rather than the hundreds his brain was being overloaded with. Like, what are you? This process was soon interrupted. So it's my turn now? When will Marta be back? I'm not sure. Once she gets better, I think. And why are you here? To take care of the house while she's away. Marta is my mother. I know. The man stared at him, surprised. What did you do to the house? The house is in bad condition. It's a very old house that really needed some maintenance. Most of the walls were moldy, and as for the furniture, Temple eyed him suspiciously. Well, recently I had to leave the house I used to live in. I needed a place to move to, so I brought my stuff here and bought some new furniture. They sat in silence for a while, having their meal. Tell me one thing, how do you know I'm Marta's son? She told me about you. I saw you in a picture. There was a pause, then new thoughts and questions pushed each other in Herman's mind. Was she your friend? Do you miss her? Tempo looked as if he had just been slapped to the face, and Herman immediately regretted his words. Yet beholding the spectrum of different emotions succeeding themselves on Tempo's face was worth the risk of whatever was coming next. Herman was amazed at this being in front of himself. It was indeed a person, mentally and emotionally developed as much as possible, more than you'd expect from an average human. What a weird way to say that. His amazement became an unrecognizable, frantic feeling in his heart as he saw him get up and turn towards the door. I won't ask you about her again. I want you to tell me if she's feeling better and when she'll be back. Next time we meet. All right, Tempo. Just before leaving, Tempo slightly turned around and spoke in a completely different tone. Don't ever tell other humans about me. Being this tolerant of humans is unlike me, and it might not last. Well, then how the fuck do you know Marta? Okay. I don't understand why we need to know what month it is. I guess it's just to show that time is passing. Tempo had picked up a bunch of fruit that grew in a secluded area of the mountain. He felt he had a favor to return and was really eager to have some news on Marta, so that's how he showed up in front of the house. He sort of regretted ending his meeting with Herman with harsh words. He was Marta's son after all. There was no point in antagonizing him. Herman, on the other hand, was too shocked by the whole situation. Everything Tempo said, every single word he spoke, kept replaying in his mind over and over for days. The aggressive last part was duly noted, but he couldn't help but focus on the good side of it. He was openly tolerated, at least for the time being. He also learned that Tempo intended to meet him again, but he wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. I'm sorry. I have no news regarding my mother. I assume that's why you're here. Tempo felt let down, but tried not to show it too much. But please stay for lunch again. He agreed. That day they talked much more freely. So Tempo, it was correct of me to assume you also eat fruit, right? Of course. I was in doubt. Your claws can give the wrong impression. Your teeth don't look too kind either. I also hunt. Would you like to hunt? Almost everything that's available. But you prefer birds? For some reason, Tempo felt those words as some sort of accusation. Well, who doesn't? What about humans? Humans aren't good preys. They're dangerous. They easily carry firearms. Also, if one of them dies, usually more humans will come looking for the dead one. It's annoying. You are absolutely right. Sounds like he already tried, he thought. He definitely wasn't as worried as he should have been. What about you? You eat differently from Marta. Do you eat meat very often? Not really. Well, actually, I do. Now that I think about it, I don't mind fish either once in a while. Keh. Tempo made a face. What? Keh. Sounding more determined this time, he just shook his head. Okay, I won't invite you for lunch when I bring fish. The atmosphere between the two was changing. Humans fear what they don't know. That's why most would be shocked by seeing a creature whose existence had completely been ignored. Even I was quite shocked the first time we met in the forest, and not much less the next time when you talked to me. Tempo stared at him. You never know what to expect from an unknown being. And now you know what to expect. No, I don't. But through sheer luck, I found you're agreeable and nice enough to accept the food I offer you, rather than preying on me, and that seems like a good sign. And what if you're wrong? Temple was smiling. Now I have a question. How did he end up in the closet? Herman couldn't tell his feelings apart. How was he supposed to react to that? Damn, I'm in trouble then. Tempo's smile got bigger. It was an innocent smile, but still, this Tempo was a bit of a sadist, wasn't he? Herman was amazed. It seemed like they were on friendly terms, or so he hoped. Anyway, these oranges you brought are really good. Tempo decided to show Herman the place that yielded the best oranges, just as he had shown Marta before. To get there, Tempo would fly from one tree to another to get a better sense of direction. It's a lot of oranges. Herman followed him until he saw the orange trees himself. Tempo harvested some oranges higher up on the trees and brought them to Herman. They kept going for a while, and Herman harvested the ones that fell on the ground. When he was done, he saw Tempo squatting on a tree branch, just staring at him. Tired? This is more than enough already. Instead of giving an answer, Tempo jumped into action to bring down some more oranges, faster than before. You take everything as a challenge, don't you? The sunset was approaching. Thank you. I'll have to bring some of these to a couple of friends. They walked together on the way back. Do you go to town every morning? Almost. How is it? It's noisy and crowded and warmer. It never snows down there. And I really don't miss it when I'm here. Is March a long month? After a long flight, Tempo landed on the house roof. He tried to be as quiet as possible. He came down to his knees and lowered his head and wings, leaning out of the roof to look at the house's entrance. Having an idea of the man's habits, he was expecting him to come out any moment now. He was still deciding whether to just observe him, as he had already done a couple of times, or to scream at him suddenly when he came out. Tempo immensely enjoyed scaring humans. He hadn't noticed something, though. Herman was already outside, fumbling with the generator in the back of the house. He'd seen him land and quietly got around the house until he could see him again, all flattened, looking down the roof. "Hey Tempo, how are you?" Tempo jumped straight onto his knees, alarmed. The feathers in his head got all ruffled. Herman was about to leave. He really wanted to stay now that Tempo was there. "Have a good day. I hope I'll see you later." Tempo had gotten caught. He was really tempted to just hide or fly away, but what would have been the point? He stared at Herman with a confused expression, then he raised his hand and waved. Spring came, and so did many occasions to meet. The two had become close. April. Herman was cooking some sort of stew that day, which was unusual, even though it snows up there, and it makes sense. He'd occasionally ask Tempo to taste, and his unenthused responses didn't really bring him down. "It just needs some more time. Maybe some salt?" No more salt. Herman, in the meantime, had noticed the other was focused on a vase he'd found who knows where. You know what? Am I supposed to be clicking on shit? My god. I hope not. Okay. Thank God. I was just about to be like, I can't do it. It looked unfamiliar, so it had to be his mother's. Must be this one right here. Some small objects could be heard scattering around in the vase, but they were hard to get out because of the vase's narrow opening. Finally, Tempo managed to get a key out of it. "Found something." Tempo stared at Herman, looking lost in thought, as if taking some sort of decision. They were upstairs, into Marta's room. They opened a drawer with many of Marta's personal belongings. Tempo was unsure whether this was right or not, but he'd gathered the feeling that over the years Marta and her son had grown incredibly cold and distant. He remembered Marta often cried with regret, and Herman would sometimes appear bitter when talking about her. Tempo didn't like this. He wanted to make things right one way or another. They found diaries, recipes, drawings, even Tempo's, from many years before, and even some letters from Herman's father. So when it says from many years before, are they just talking about, in general, the diaries and the recipes and the drawings, and Tempo's letters are drawings? Like, what? Okay. They talked about the past for a while. Something that changed Herman's outlook on things was discovering that the first time Tempo met Marta, she didn't yet live on the mountain. She moved there much later, and that was more than 20 years before. It was a long afternoon. In the end, they both found themselves with much heavier moods for different reasons. Some of my fondest memories are tied to this room. I'm glad you left it mostly as it was. It was early in the morning. The sun had barely risen. It was windy and a bit cold for the season. Herman had taken a stroll and found Tempo along the way, so they kept walking together until they reached a hill. "I know you used to spend a lot of time at my mother's house when she was here. I don't want to change your habits. I know it's not the same, but as I told you before, you can stay. There's a lot of space, and I'm not even home for most of the day. Seriously, it'd make me happy." There was a short silence between the two. Marta used to keep her bedroom's window open at all times, so I could get in whenever I wanted. "Good, that's what I'll do too." Summer arrived. By then they both had successfully invaded the other's lives. At the end of summer, a particular event defined their relationship. One evening turned night, Tenpo found himself flying in torrential rain. It happened quite suddenly. No hiding spots around, no caves, nothing could shield him. An increasingly impetuous wind made flying impossible. Fortunately, Herman's house was close by. Once he arrived, he noticed the car wasn't there and the house's lights were all out. He tried getting in by the bedroom's window, but that was closed as well. Finding that window closed gave him an unexpected feeling of pain. He screeched, hoping that Herman could somehow be around and hear him. Herman was driving and was still far, far away. He could barely see the mountain road. During the drive, he'd been concerning himself over the generator outside and any and all the damages that weather might have caused. Once he arrived, he immediately forgot those concerns. He pulled the handbrake and got out so fast the car hadn't fully stopped yet. Tin, what are you doing here? Tenpo was holding onto a corner of the front door. He'd heard Herman speak and get closer, but did not move. When Herman was by his side, he barely looked at him from the tail of his eye. They got inside both completely wet. Herman hurriedly brought some towels. Tenpo looked impassive, and that made his heart sink. He held on to his sinking heart in silence for a while as he stared at the fireplace. How long have you been out there? Why didn't you get in by the bedroom's window? The lack of response didn't stop him. He started blabbering about how the worst things happen at the worst times, and of course that day he had to be exceptionally late. Then he tried to get Tenpo to sit down and dry his wings by the fireplace. Tenpo didn't seem inclined to take the suggestion, nor to pay him attention in general. At that point, Herman left for a bit to change clothes and grab a towel to dry his hair. When he came back, Tenpo was still where he left him and was staring at the fire. Okay, so that was an outfit? I thought he was just a feathered person. a feathered Tengu or whatever. I'm not sure what's going on really. But okay. Ten, sit down with your wings facing the fire. He's like, no, you can't tell me what to do. Tenpo started to appear annoyed, and even though that wasn't good, it was at least something. With a heavy sigh, Herman sat down instead, facing the other. I'm sorry, I saw the window was closed. I don't know how it happened. I don't remember closing it. I wish I could have foreseen this. I'm trying to see where the hell I'm supposed to be reading. Okay. Then he tried to get Tenpo to sit down and dry his wings by the fireplace. Tenpo didn't seem inclined to take the suggestion or to pay him attention in general. At that point, Herman left for a bit to change clothes and grab a towel to dry his hair. When he came back, Tenpo was still where he'd left him and was staring at the fire. As Herman was talking, Tenpo walked a couple of steps closer to him, silent, looking lost in thought and still annoyed. He then looked towards the man, trying to avoid his eyes. Herman was about to process the thought of Tenpo finally accepting his advice to sit down and dry his wings by the fire. He didn't have the time. Tenpo, without hesitation, climbed on his legs and rested his body against his own. Herman couldn't react. He didn't expect that kind of gesture, especially in the middle of that situation. It was different from anything that had ever happened between them up until that point. Tenpo's wings had dried off, but that didn't matter. What? I'm sorry, but I thought he was a little... Like, I know he's not a little kid, but also he looks like one. But whatever. They kissed. The time had followed... I'm sorry. Okay. Well, then why the fuck was he in the closet? Well, never mind. The time that followed was without a doubt the happiest for both. Then, 7 months later, everything changed. It all started with a rashly taken decision. 7 months? So, like, the last time we saw them was September, right? Or May, whatever. On a bright moonlit night, a restless Tenpo quietly exited Herman's house, flying out of a window. He needed to fly for a while and feel the breeze. He reached a place on the other side of the mountain with a beautiful view. He took in the view, feeling a bit melancholic. At that moment, he heard a noise. It was far away, but it also seemed everywhere around. He couldn't pinpoint a direction, a presence. No, many, many presences. He looked up, straight at the moon. An immense flock was flying so high up it was barely visible. Only the bright moon and a mostly clear sky made it possible to notice. Just as impulsively as he had come to that place, he was caught by the desire of following them. This desire wasn't unknown by him. Being identified by humans would have been a risk, flying by himself, but with a group like that, flying at night, he would have gone unnoticed. He wouldn't have had the time to tell Herman and not lose track of the group. Will they let me follow them? Where will they go? Will I be able to hide during the day? It was a great risk, but he really wanted to go. He had no time to think it over. He had to try. Clutching his hands, feeling sparks in his heart, he followed his instincts and the flock. Well, he is a bird-type creature thing. It took months, but Tenpo returned, feeling born anew. With another long nightly flight, he landed on the roof of Herman's house. He had no time to take in the familiar view. Strange noises succeeded themselves one after the other until he recognized the sound of the front door opening. A man that looked like Herman came out on unsteady feet. He turned around and walked backwards hastily, until his eyes could reach the view on Tenpo, standing on the roof. Tenpo smiled brightly at first, but then the smile turned into a confused expression. The two reunited. Herman looked so worn down he was almost unrecognizable. He acted as if nothing was wrong or nothing strange had happened. Whatever Tenpo had in mind to say just lost in the sudden confusion he felt once he saw Herman. In the end, he managed to explain what had happened during those last months. Herman didn't reserve any special reaction for Tenpo's explanation and looked as if he wasn't really taking in anything. His words and responses were erratic, disconnected. Tenpo got worried. He felt that asking Herman what was up with him would have brought him nowhere. He'd already given a vague explanation about having had some very rough work days, and Tenpo knew it couldn't have been just that. His experience with Marta led him to think Herman might have gotten sick while he was away. He decided the only thing to do was staying close to him and keeping him company. They sat on the couch. Tenpo was asked about his experience. Soon Herman gave up his attempts at conversation and just sat there in silence. He seemed to be fighting between the desire to stay awake and the need to sleep. Tenpo pushed his shoulder against the couch as a way to tell him to lay on his back. Then he rested his head against Herman's arm, and at that the man almost immediately shut off. That's good, Tenpo thought. He fell asleep as well, not much later. Waking up was unusually hard. Tenpo had never slept so heavily, and for the moment he couldn't understand why. He didn't remember when he had fallen asleep, nor he tried to recognize his surroundings. He closed his eyes again. At some point he woke up again. He recognized Marta's bedroom. He felt a strong discomfort that gradually grew to an unidentifiable pain, and for some reason he couldn't move. His body felt limp and incredibly tired, but the growing fear inside him gave him the energy to turn his head and look around. He tried to gather the energy to move and scream. He tried to call Herman's name, but an odd hissing sound was all he could muster. Soon enough, Herman entered the room and got close to his side. Tenpo looked at him. His eyes looked empty. He seemed unreachable. Tenpo tried asking for help, but Herman didn't respond in any way. He started talking, as if talking to himself. It has all been wrong from the start. I didn't question you, your being, your existence. It took me this long to realize how foolish I was to fall for it. I fell for my own tricks for 2 years, and it's time to make it stop. Point is, Tenpo, you just are not. Tenpo managed to scream. He was unsure of what Herman meant to say, and he couldn't even rationalize his own fear. He had no idea what was going on, and neither do I. I just want this to end. You won't remember me. Will I remember you? I guess those are the little time cards we had to find in the last one that was kind of annoying. At that point, Herman administered an injection. Where the fuck did you get that? And Tenpo gained the most bitter of realizations at the very last moment. As he let go of his strength, will, and consciousness, Four for a Birth, Part 2. Why are these black? A meaningful wound, undead shadow of himself. I don't know what that means and what I'm supposed to click. But get ready for some ASMR. Here comes the mouse. Oh, so this is the present? Herman stared at the now empty slot inside the wardrobe. Okay, so I'm gonna click that. Where did it go? It is your boyfriend or it thing. I don't know. A feeling of desperation overtook him. That's what you get. A sudden wave of black matter pushed him away from the wardrobe, making him fall. He sat there in a pool of black, trying to let numbness overtake pain and fear. The windows were black. The earthquake had stopped. The room was slowly filling up. Black substance kept dripping from the ceiling and seeping through the walls. Don't look for it. It is no more. I bet it's manhole. Tenpo? Look at the state of that hand. It's disgusting. You just left it to rot like that? Were you waiting for it to fall off or what? That's the sort of thing that can kill you, you know? Did you mean to die that way? No. But I did not want it to heal either. When did you even get an injury like this? Not that I think it could heal. Had I found you dead for such a dumb reason, I would have been sad. I would have been mad. That's the only way I could be any angrier right now. That's not something I should be telling you, is it? Let's get to what I need to tell you then. Did you know that your mother is dead? I think we all kind of knew that. Oh. Or that she's in a coma. Not anymore. I guess he has his ways of knowing. So she's dead now? She was ill. I wonder for how long she's been. I only found out incidentally the first time I came here. She didn't even recognize me. It was already too late, but she wouldn't hold it against me. She wasn't expecting a visit from me anyway. The earthquake started once again, more violent than before. Herman heard some terrifying loud noises. It was as if the house was sinking into the ground. The room appeared to collapse. The ceiling and the floor seemed to be slowly getting closer to each other. This is really... finally... It's odd how, between us, I'll be the one to reunite with her in the end. Herman, we don't know anything about the afterlife. You don't know what you mean. Then unexpectedly, the shocks got weaker and stopped once again. You know what I liked about Herman above anything else? He was a good person. I have observed more people than you'd think during my time, and I couldn't help but feel he was different than most. As it turns out, the man completely fooled me. Isn't that right? I'm sure you thought too highly of me, but I never meant to fool you. What are you talking about? Tell me how it came to this. Was it your goal since the beginning? Or did you start hating me somewhere along the way? I never hated you, not once, not for a moment. Then, why? I haven't clicked on one clue. Herman woke up and slowly dragged himself across the bed to turn on the lamp. He looked at the time and then at the open window. Looks like someone was even earlier than me. It's not even dawn yet. His day went on as it normally would have. He went to work and came back home. The day after he did the same, and then the day after again. Tenpo just wasn't around those days. Where could he be? Was he angry at me? Yeah, Tenpo has no communication skills. The first few days he felt just a bit restless. The fifth day was a Saturday. Herman dedicated entirely to looking for Tenpo in the forest. That's a weird sentence. Whenever Tenpo wasn't around, he had a few specific places he ended up being. He wasn't in any of those places. He is also a bird type something creature thing. He probably just returned to nature because he's not supposed to just be up in someone's house, Herman. The following days, Herman tried new places. In 2 weeks' time, Herman had explored every inch of the mountain. Must be a small mountain. Tenpo was nowhere to be found. I searched for you so much. Every waking moment, I quit my job. The longer it went, the harder it was. Something happened to him. Maybe he's hurt and got stuck somewhere. Someone captured him. The only hope I had was that somehow you had decided to leave and never come back. You just left like I did, like my mother did. Maybe you hated me, maybe you were tired of me. You had shown no sign of feeling that way. It was my only hope, but it didn't make sense. You disappeared for 5 months. I did some stupid things to keep it together. At some point, the pain I felt started to seem unreal. Surreal. I remember him so well. There is no way. He's been torn away from me so suddenly for no reason. How could anyone ever accept it? How could that just happen? How am I supposed to believe it? I can't pinpoint exactly when, but a time came where believing you never existed at all seemed the easiest thing to believe. In fact, it became the only logical explanation. I had no strength left to keep believing you were no more. I could only believe you never were to begin with. All of the time I had spent with you I believed to be fantasy, a symptom of an ill mind. From that point on, it became hard for me to discern between real and unreal. It's a pretty unreal type of thing, dude. Herman had just come out of his bedroom and was heading for the stairs. Suddenly he heard a noise. It was a noise he hadn't heard in a long time. It hadn't been really that long, but to him, at that moment, it felt as if that noise came from a totally different reality entirely. It was a close sequence of thump noises coming from the roof. For a second he froze, his mind trying to process that sound. He ran down the stairs and across the dining room, knocking down a few chairs. He got out, and walking backwards on trembling legs, he laid his eyes on the figure on the roof. He was like a Mr. Watch. Mr. Watching whatever that is. Then suddenly you were there looking indifferent on the house roof. I thought you as impossible before, but by then you really were impossible to me. I was gone. When at the peak of my belief of you being a figment of my imagination, you just appeared out of nowhere. I'm not sure what happened. I believed my mind was playing me for a fool. If you were a product of my mind, you were my mind's to give and my mind's to take away. I couldn't bear with that. I had to regain control somehow. I had to deal with the fact you weren't real in some way. I decided the only way to fight against my ill mind was to prove to myself you weren't real. Whatever appeared to be in my house, sleeping beside me on the couch, never existed at all. I decided to be delusional. Making up something I can't live without, and then taking it suddenly away from me, is definitely something my mind would do. I am not going to put up with its self-destructive whims. What I did to you wasn't planned. Where the heck did you get those injections or whatever? Those sedatives I used on you, they were meant for me. I got them while you were gone. Okay, that explains something. If I could go back to that day and do something different, that would be actually using them on myself. Tenpo isn't here nor anywhere else. Tenpo is not. Will I remember you? For a while, I didn't really understand what I had done. There are holes on the floor. I've seen them open right now. Have I been imagining it? Oh, that's kind of cool. You were dead. There were no wounds. Your heart was still. Your blood was still. So you've been for days. Yet, I can't have imagined this. Yet, it went through the bed. It went through the floor. It ate at my hand. Your body, however, was untouched by it. This him. Sanity resurfaced in the most painful way. I started to face the fact that my memories might have been real. You were real. Everything I feared might have happened to you. All of the worries I used to have, everything became true to my own hand. For a while, I tried to deny it. Oh, shit, I was supposed to be clicking on stuff. Oops. While gaining the realization, however, I also gained a hope. Maybe it was just a suggestion. But I could have sworn there was something that led that force's movements its direction. Something that's not alive cannot move on its own. It couldn't have been over just like that. Despite what I had done, whatever it was that went through the ceiling and through my hand was still moving. I knew you're strong, Tenpo. I knew you would have come back. From some sedatives? When the earthquake started, I knew they were a sign. I waited for you. I'm here only to pay my debt, which I probably would not have had to pay if I just wasn't ridiculous and delulu. When the house seemed to fully crash underground in one go. All around the house, the ground seemed to get dug up by something emerging. Two enormous black waves emerged, one in front of where the house was and one in the back. They seemed to be wings. The body they belonged to then emerged as well. It was an enormous Tenpo-like colossus. It had absorbed and crushed the house inside itself. The gigantic Tenpo look-alike seemed ready to roar and scream, but no sound of the sort came out of it. All that could be heard were the thundering sounds of the earth being shook and the house being destroyed. Things happened in the middle of nowhere. Herman, inside the giant, was being crushed and drowned. Tenpo's mind was ablaze. In this violent frenzy, his thoughts were scattered, blinded. However, one thought, just one won over any other. He thought of his dear Martha. She wanted him to live so strongly, and Tenpo knew she would have wanted the same for her son. She wouldn't want him to die. I mean, I've just only crushed him. I wouldn't want him to die. The giant stopped its movements. It was as if time had stopped. It looked literally frozen in time. Then it all came down, a heavy fall of rubble, wood, metal, and concrete. An unusual black cloud grew on top of it. The house was no more. All was destroyed. What is that? Trees uprooted, land ruined. A black curse seemed to have been inflicted upon it. From those tainted ruins, slowly Tenpo emerged. He looks so weird without his black, tunic. Soon he spotted the man lying on the ground a few steps ahead. Welp. I probably should have clicked it. Dang. Birds. More of them. Maybe his hand. After a while, he flew away. Those look more like regular birds. I'm not sure what happened to Tenpo after that. Who is telling the story? I'm sorry. Was Herman telling the story? We'll have to meet again one day, but not right now. I have other pastimes for now. Try again. Ugh. Alright, y'all. I'll let you know when I do that shit. Oh, there it is. The undead wound or whatever. Yeah, so I clicked this in the first part when the wound is basically talked about by Tenpo. And you click it and nothing happens. You don't get the check. It's only in the memory when he first receives the wound that you get the check when you click it. Even though they both have just as much importance on the scene, like it's his hand and then this and then everything else is kind of in the background. This is kind of exactly what we see the first time, and it's like when I think of me clicking on that and that not giving me a check, I don't think to click on this. So that can be a little, I don't know what to say. It's just, I mean, I guess just click everything. At this point, that's what I'm doing. Okay, I'll see y'all when I find the second one. Oh. Sir, I thought it was Tenpo, but I guess he is the only one who probably partially died or whatever. I still don't understand the thing about the birds. Okay, so we found both the clues. 4 for a birth, part 3, part whatever, epilogue. Valeria? I literally cheated on you, but with the, well, maybe not cheated, we were separated. We officially have separated. It doesn't count. I'm sorry I woke you up. This is too sudden, isn't it? It's because visiting time is so little. How do you feel? Very confused and kind of in pain. I don't look happy, but I am. Now I do. I mean, I've heard you were almost done for, and now you're just sitting there saying you're kind of in pain. Anyway, I noticed those beautiful flowers. What? Oh, right. I haven't talked to Gin yet, but I bet those are her doing. On that note, I brought some biscuits for you when you feel better. I guess cookies. Oh, thanks. I did meet Felice, however. He was so happy. He said nobody expected you to recover like this. Yes, I've been told. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if he hadn't gone to your house that day. What? He was worried because of the earthquakes and the avalanches. He probably wanted to get you to leave the house. Imagine what he went through when he found there was no house at all, and to find you there among the rubble unconscious. The timing was incredibly lucky. The police are definitely going to ask you about your insurance policy. Did you burn it down, sir? Haven't you two talked about it yet? It's crazy what sort of things can happen between close friends. What? Herman, there's something I need to tell you. It's what I mainly came here for. Answers. I want you to forgive me. These last years, I never really noticed what you were going through. It was my mistake not noticing it. I must have been too self-absorbed, too focused on my own needs. I probably tormented you while you were dealing with heavier thoughts. I just didn't know. I wish you had told me. I need stuff written in the sky. I'm not sure what happened to you lately, but I can't help but feel everything would have been different if I'd been more aware of your feelings before. What happened between us was terrible, but you'll never know. And in the end, what I think really led to it was that we just failed to communicate. I want to help you now and be near you. I ask for nothing else. Thank you, Valeria. That'd make me immensely happy. Who is talking? Herman? Thank you. We'll get through this moment. You'll see. Everything will go back to normal. What is the spoopiness? So it was a hospital door, right? Oh. I'm sure it will. Who? Who are you? Man. Tempo, I thought that was your skin the whole time. The black tunic, but it was just clothes. Isabetta. Really cool. I can tell that they do a lot of design. I mean, just the interface and stuff is just so clean looking. It's almost like a restaurant menu at like some spiffy Italian restaurant. Like, it looks very clean. I'm glad that they have like the fonts and the textures and stuff here. And most of this visual novel is very quiet. Like, I almost feel really awkward when I'm reading it, but maybe I just got used to like overproduced media, maybe? If you're just trying to tell a story that takes like 4 minutes, I mean, what else? Why do you need to do it like that? But yeah, so Tenpo is confusing. I'm still not sure who Manhole is, but I think it's supposed to be a remnant memory. Oh my gosh. Sir, explain yourself. Hey. Itch. He's like, yeah, I know you're confused, but I'm still not gonna answer anything. But yeah, hey y'all, it's your girl Esneo here, but in post. And while editing, and after having a couple of days of like sitting, I was confused, and I'm still confused, but I think for sure, because it was talking about the birth of something at the very beginning, and each chapter says the birth of the four, something. I was like, who the heck is telling this story? Because at first it feels like it's in third person by a general neutral view. And then it's like, it switches from like the third person point of view of Tenpo. And then Herman. I was like, I don't know who's telling the story. And I don't know who's talking to me. The audience or just itself. But anyway, that's another thing to talk about. But I was like, who is being birthed? Like, what's going on? And like at the very end, I think the only new character that came out of whatever happened with Tenpo and Herman was Manhole. Right? Manhole was birthed. He's the one who's probably telling the story. If I'm being frank.
who Manhole is almost like a child, so to speak, since they only live in that sedated dream world type thing. And I don't think Herman had ever interacted with Manhole until the very end, where Manhole is actually narrating what's actually happening, and Herman looks out the window. Manhole is there, and he's like, I mean, he's another supernatural creature, and he's just like, the fuck? But yeah, that's also something. I was like, something about this is still not making sense to me, but I think that's what that is. And the other thing is, yeah, I was operating on the like, I don't know. It could just be that I don't know how to explain it. Like, I don't know how I do it, but like when I'm reading, sometimes I'm not always absorbing what I'm reading because there's a lot of things going on when you're reading a visual novel. You're looking at the visuals, listening to the music if there is any, and you're trying to connect the visuals to what you're reading. I don't know, it'd be a whole lot of stuff going on in my brain. But the entire time, I just kept thinking that Tenpo and Herman were like some kind of way long lost step siblings. Because as soon as I was like, but they knew each other. Like, uh, Tenpo knew the mother from a long time ago. So that's gotta mean that maybe he is her child. And that's why he's so connected to her. Because they never really explain how this 100-year-old something ass deity knows this old woman who just happens to be a human and he don't interact with humans. And I'm thinking, oh well, the mountain is lonely, maybe she the only human walking around and it's okay to talk to her. But then you're like, they didn't meet when they were on the mountain. You got drawings from Tenpo from 20 years ago. I'm like, the fuck? I'm like, is that her baby? That's her baby. That's Herman's long lost sibling. And like, they're reconnecting and they're trying to bond because they don't have anybody. And they both in common lost the mother. And Tenpo being so connected to the mother and acting very much like a child. Whereas Herman doesn't seem to be as close to his mother, but cares about her. I'm just like, oh, this is a way for them to like bond over the mother, talk about the mother, and figure out how they're gonna have a relationship as, you know, siblings. But it's not. I should have read all the signs. Despondent character with the one who's always interested, always starting the conversations and stuff. They just don't want to be alone. They're making a new friend type thing. Like, I didn't read any of that as romantic until like the rain scene where it was just kind of like, this doesn't feel sibling like. I wasn't thinking anything of it. Herman is such a dry character who doesn't have any color in his life, literally. Even when Tenpo shows up, he's just black and white, like literally. He's like, you go to the paint store and you go, I want black and I want white. I don't want eggshell white, I don't want off white, I don't want cream, I don't want beige. I want white. He is like chalk white and like stark black. Okay. And I'm just thinking, okay. And then Herman's like, yeah, just normal. Nothing really special going on there. And I'm just like, they're siblings or they're friends or something. I don't know. I wasn't reading anything as romantic, and I probably should have. Like, it had all the tropes. I don't know. The absence of color be throwing my ass off. I'm like, I might just be needing of dopamine because a lot of the color palette is just very muted. It's very graphic design, very clean cut business, or even like restaurant menu color. I don't know. Interesting. Muted is just not a color palette that I care about, but like here, I don't know. I don't know if it adds, But I don't have anything against the art. I feel like it's one of the better aspects of the entire visual novel, but you know what I'm saying. I didn't see it coming. Mostly because I think it's just Tempo so small. I'm not gonna call him a child because he's not, but also he looks so small and he's so childlike and talks and acts like baby and be all sad about mommy dearest, and I'd be like, oh, he's just a baby and he just need help and he just need to have friend. And then Herman is like, I be friend and I be also friend and also you talk to me about mom dearest because she's also my mom. And I'm like, they're siblings. And then the kiss happened and I was like, I feel like I got flipped upside down. I wish I had read that earlier. I wish I had read the room way earlier because me feel dumb. But yeah, I just wanted to come in real quick, talk about the story and where it was going and how I was confused at the end. But then I was like, you know what? Who telling this story? Why is Manhole there at the end? Is that just a cameo? Because he was just in the story in general. And then it starts off talking about how he was born. And at first I was like, well, maybe it's not Manhole. I'm thinking it's Tempo. Tempo's telling the story about how he was born in this weird world where he seems to not know anything, like he just got created as a whole deity, child like adult thing person. I guess got birthed by the universe and now he's just walking around. He don't know his name, he don't know who this woman is, but he know her, and in this house he can't leave. And I'm just like, that's the creature that got born. That's the birth of something. Right? Then you get toward the middle and stuff with Herman. And then you're like, okay, well, who the fuck is even telling this story? Is it Herman? What does Tempo have to do with this boring human life? It's metaphorical. Maybe Herman is Tempo. Or whatever. Why is he telling such a weird metaphorical story to talk about his boring ass self? And then somewhere in there it's like, oh, Tempo is actually a being in the real world who can talk to Herman in real time. Well, then what is all that other malarkey with him being in this weird house that shifts and shit? And I'm just like, I don't know what that is. That's the world he came from. And now he lives in the human world and he can go between the both of them. It took me forever to realize that that same house is Herman's house. Or more so, Marta's house before it became Herman's house. That's why the furniture was changing and shit. And he was like, what's going on? Because he lived in the closet. But he was still somewhat awake and also asleep. And while he was in that world of himself, he created Manhole because his memory was clouded from the sedatives. That the shadow that is Herman in his memory is Manhole, a whole new creature who seems to take a liking to him immediately. And if it just sounds like I hate everything or I don't like this game, that's not what's happening. I was just hella confused. And when I'm confused, I don't know what's happening. I don't know my butt from my face. Okay, I'd be like, what's happening? What's up? What's down? And I get really frustrated. But I think that's the point. I kept also thinking, like, the developer said that this reads like a movie script. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, if you think about all the narration that happens at critical points, like, there's even some part where, like, there's, like, I don't know if it was happening at the beginning. There's a part toward this last entry where Jin and Felice, he's my least favorite character in this whole thing. He did the right thing, but he was also just, I just didn't fucking like him. And the conversations in here are really confusing. And then the sprite work doesn't always translate how I'm supposed to feel. And then there's no real music to back up if it's lighthearted or not. Like, Jin is having an argument with Felice, and I'm still not sure if Felice and Jin are married. Sometimes he just refers to her in a way almost like she's a roommate or something, but it's evident that that's either their child or that's his sister and that's his nephew. Like I have, I think they told us that they were together, but I don't know. I don't know, and I'm not gonna check. Maybe y'all can tell me. But anyway, there's this part. How did I get so far away? But anyway, there's this part where there's these quotations after they have an argument about what the son saw in, like Francie, whatever he saw in the closet, which was Tenpo, the doll, even though it was Tenpo, the being. And there's just like these quotations of someone narrating what was going on at Herman's house or like what was going on in this argument or whatever. And I was like, who is narrating? Because it's not Herman. Is it Tenpo? Like, is he somehow aware even though he's asleep? What? And how is, well, I guess, you know, Manhole can leave the house or more so the closet and can wreak havoc and look around and cause trouble. So he's probably the one who's able to, like, I guess, watch his parents, which I guess is Tenpo and Herman. This story has so little to do with the mother. I don't even know what to say. Like, it did have something to do with her. That's how they were bonded in general, because they both know the mom. We don't really learn much about her, though, or why the relationship between her and Herman is strained. They could just be estranged. You know, family's not always close, but yeah, Tenpo is so close to her, and then Herman isn't, and then there's this person talk about they got birthed, and I'm thinking, well, Tenpo might be the sibling of, you know, that maybe she's like, she got with a bird creature man, Tengu thing, which was Herman's dad or being, whatever, I don't know how that works. She had Tenpo first, and then she had Herman later in her life. I was like, that would explain so much, but it was so far away from the truth that I confused and confuddled myself. It's probably why people who play games like this just don't talk all their theories and shit, but I just can't do that, which is why I made my own channel. But at least this one had a lot to talk about and theorize on. It does feel like something you would have to watch over a couple times or play a couple times over, but now that I'm thinking back on it, I think I'm good with just the gist that I've come to, even though there's no confirmation about anything I've said. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this playthrough, because your girl is always confused. I had a good time. I laughed a lot. I don't think I was supposed to, but anyway, shout out to the creator of this game, and if you want to support them, go ahead. The link is down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.